Let's talk about managing logistics customer service. So at this point, we understand logistics cost. We understand how transportation, distribution, and handling and storage of inventory are the major costs. We understand aspects of logistics customer service, how it's part of overall customer service, how it leads to greater value, it leads to value creation. We talked about aspects of logistics customer service before the transaction, during the transaction, like delivery, installation, after the transaction, like returns, handling, customer complaints, things like that. And so now we're going to talk about at a little bit higher level, how do we think about and manage logistics customer service for our company. So we're going to talk about three aspects of that. The first one is we establish logistics customer service objectives. So we have to have a way in which we can see what's the right level of customer service to offer, and that's going to be linked to our logistics strategy. Then we want to have a way to measure logistics customer service. And then inevitably, sometimes there will be service failures. Sometimes the service will not be up to the expectations of the customer. So how do we recover from that? So those are three things we'll discuss today. Okay, let's talk about establishing logistics customer service objectives. This is a really important slide because it shows us that we should not forget that the goal of logistics is to create value which leads to superior profits for the company. We cannot leave our profit motivation and just try to give customers everything because that's going to be prohibitively expensive. So on the x-axis, we have some level of logistics customer service. Okay, if you're talking about delivery, it could be how the speed of delivery. So closer to 0 would be we deliver the item maybe next month, or like we choose the cheapest form of transportation, rail or something, and we deliver a long time into the future to the customer. Okay, somewhere here. And then on the right-hand side of the x-axis, we would have a very high level of logistics customer service. In terms of delivery, it might be like drone delivery in the next 20 minutes or something. And we have a storage location within 5 miles of all customers, and a drone can fly 5 miles in about 5 to 10 minutes. And so we do like a 15, 20-minute delivery to the customer's home with drones or something, right? It will be like the extreme endpoint. And then we may be somewhere in the middle, okay? So we have two curves, the revenue curve and the cost curve. As you offer more and more logistics service level, you can see that your revenue grows initially and then it flattens out. If you think about it, that is to be expected. Above a certain level, the value does not go up for the customer for having a little bit more speedier delivery or a little bit more variety of products available. So once you have millions of things available on Amazon.com, adding 5 more things is not going to change the average user's experience of Amazon.com. Okay. Once you have same day delivery or within 8-hour delivery or something like that, going faster, maybe 2 hours is worth it. But then beyond that, going any faster, the customer may say, okay, I'm not willing to pay any more for faster delivery. 2 hour or same day is fast enough for me. So then you'll see the revenue curve start to flatten out because nobody cares beyond because you're fast enough. So nobody cares that you give you a little bit faster delivery than what you're doing with 2 hours or same day delivery. So the revenue can't go up forever. You can't. People are going to stop caring about the logistics customer service once it gets beyond some really high level, because beyond that it's like not needed. Like the customer doesn't need it. And if you look at the cost, they start to grow exponentially because it gets prohibitively expensive to offer a higher and higher level of logistics customer service. You might get to same day delivery by opening 30, 40, 50 distribution centers, but to get to within 2 hour delivery or something, you may need to go to 200 distribution centers in the US. Okay. So the costs don't grow linearly, they can grow exponentially. So you see the cost curve rising very quickly at higher service offerings. And obviously the difference between the revenue and the cost curve is your profit. So you can see at very low levels of customer service, your profit is also low because you don't make a lot of revenue. At a very high level, of logistics customer service, your profit is again very low because your revenue has flattened out and your costs are going up exponentially. But somewhere along the middle, you make a big fat amount of profit because the revenue line is so much higher than the cost line. And so we want to figure out what that profit maximization point is where revenue far exceeds our costs. And so we say that is the profit maximizing level of customer service, logistics customer service to offer. And it doesn't mean that's what you'll decide. You may go a little bit above that, a little bit below that. You may say, oh no, I don't have the money to make that much investment into my logistics infrastructure, so I'm going to offer a logistics service level a little bit below the profit maximization point. Or you may go a little bit above. I have such strong competition. I want to stand out from my competition. I want to give consumers a higher level of logistics customer service. And so you may go beyond that. So what point you decide to operate on doesn't have to be profit maximizing, but it helps to know what the profit maximizing point is so you know how far away you are from that. Now, there's one problem with this picture. Costs are not that hard to figure out. Like if you have to open 50 more distribution centers and you have 30 right now, you know how expensive it is to open a distribution center, how many workers you'll need, because you already have 30. You have data from those 30 distribution centers. To support this many customers, this many volumes, how much equipment I need, how many workers I need, what sort of space I need, and then you can have an analyst work and tabulate all those costs together and give you the increase in cost from going from 30 distribution centers to 50 or 60 or 80. So you can map out the cost curve. Okay, if you have a product variety, you know that as you add more and more SKUs to your product availability or product variety that you offer, it's going to lead to increase in holding cost and inventory cost at this rate because you have data, historical data on different amounts of product variety that you offer and what was your inventory levels. And so you can use your historical data to kind of estimate the cost curve, no matter which quality dimension you are thinking about. You can say, what will it cost for me to offer these services to the customer? But the revenue line is actually unknown. You don't know the revenue line. I've drawn it on the picture. In the picture, I've drawn it as if I knew it, but I don't know exactly where that line is. I do know one point on the line because I know my current revenue and I know my current logistics service level. So I can just say, okay, if this is delivery on the x-axis, I can say currently I'm doing next day delivery, and with next day delivery, this is my revenue. So I know one point on the line. But one point on the line is not enough if I don't know the whole curve or line. I can't find the profit maximizing point, right? I can't find that point where on logistics customer service where profit is maximized because I don't know the revenue curve. I only know one point on the revenue curve. So what do we do? Well, we have some things we can do. Okay, so let's see what are our options. Now, the good news is that we are usually not going to be operating at an extremely low level of logistics customer service because then we wouldn't be competitive in the market. Nobody would want to, buy from us. And we are most likely not going to be in the very highest levels of logistics customer service because there the revenue curve has flattened out. There's no advantage to being there. We could offer a lower level of customer service, get the same revenue, and have lower costs. The area of the curve where we're interested in is approximately a straight line. And what's true about straight lines, you might remember from your geometry class in school, is that if you know 2 points on the straight line, you know the straight line. You connect the 2 points and you have the line. We already know 1 point on the straight line. That's where we currently are. If you're an existing company, we have some revenue, we have some level of logistics customer service. So tada, we have 1 point on the line. We want to figure out if we increase or decrease our customer service, what's the impact on revenue, the slope. And if we get a second point on the line, we can calculate that slope, right? And so how do we get the second point on the line? Well, the easiest way is to do an experiment. A lot of companies like to do experiments over a limited time and or limited geography. So in a particular city, in a particular state, Amazon may roll out same day delivery or drone delivery and see the impact on sales, see how much it costs, and then decide whether to go forward with that idea or not. Other companies can do the same thing. Zappos did, I believe, free 2-day delivery, okay, for a holiday season. Okay, and that became so popular that they then decided to roll it out across their network because they had a lot of increase in sales. So these are some ways we can try to find the second point on the line and then figure out the line which shows us how revenue increases or decreases as you modify your logistics customer service level. We could do market research to identify what customer service initiatives are actually valued by the customer. Some type of market research, like conjoint analysis, can also reveal how much the customer is willing to pay for certain logistics customer service elements. Like how much is the customer willing to pay for a faster delivery. We can do gaming where consumers see different offerings, one with, let's say, free delivery but it takes a week, one with maybe free delivery that takes 2 days, one with maybe a little bit payment for delivery and that is next day. And then we can see which decisions customers take, like they have some virtual money and they spend the money to buy different products, and each product has a different service bundle. So it's kind of similar to conjoint analysis where you give options to customers and see which one they prefer for how much money. And then you can try to estimate the customer preference on how much is the value created for the customer, how much is the customer willing to pay for different levels of logistics customer service. And actually, you're going to do it for different bundles of logistics customer service because logistics customer service is not one-dimensional. There's a delivery aspect to it, there's a product variety aspect to it, there's a free returns type aspect to it. So you might try a few bundles and see which one the customers value the most. Then you can do benchmarking. You have a competitor that's probably offering a different level of logistics customer service, and you can see, how much revenue they're making. Especially if you can get the revenue for products which are very similar, like you sell the same product, your competitor sells a similar product, and they have a different logistics customer service level. So say, okay, if I was to go to their level, how much would my sales be for these products? And then what I already referred to is experimentation. You can try it in a limited geography, limited time, and see what the response is, and then use that data to figure out whether you want to do it or not. Because we know, or we calculate, or we estimate its effect on revenue, and we can calculate the cost required to offer it, and then we can make a business case on how much money we'll make if we offer that logistics customer service level. How do we measure logistics customer service? Let's look at this metric. And I want you to pause the video and think about pros and cons of this metric. So let's say our metric is percentage of customer orders shipped within time limits specified in customer service policy. So maybe in our policy or on our website, we say, okay, if you place an order with us, we will dispatch this item the next day, within the next business day, or within 2 business days. So you're advertising that as aspects of logistics customer service. Now, in real life, you may be meeting that target or may not be, or maybe meeting it, maybe achieving a target well below that. So you can then see what percentage of customer orders are shipped within the time specified. So if you're doing next day shipments, like within 24 hours we ship out your order, then you can check how many orders actually get shipped out within 24 hours. Now, the good thing about this metric is that it's going to tell us, what percentage of the time are we meeting our stated goal. But it has many disadvantages because when we ship something, the customer cares about it indirectly. The customer doesn't really care about when we ship something. The customer really cares about when they get the thing. And there could be delays after we ship. We could ship it on time, but there could be damages along the way. There could be delays along the way. So we are not measuring when the item actually arrives at the customer's location. Is that within the expected timeline? We are not measuring the condition upon arrival. Was the package damaged along the way? We are not measuring if we ship the complete order or are we shipping just a partial order, because the customer may prefer to get the complete order in one shipment. So this is not very comprehensive. It leaves a lot of things out that could happen along the way. You really want your logistics customer service measurement to be to capture everything that happens till the customer gets the item, and not just be myopic and think about, oh, it left my facility, I shipped it out, so my responsibility is over. Okay. Okay, so let's look at some commonly used customer service metrics. For product availability, if we have back orders, a back order is when a customer wants something, we don't have it, like in stock. So we say, oh, we're going to get a shipment next week, or we're going to have a manufacturer produce it. So we'll give it to you after some time with a delay. So you don't want too many back orders, because a delayed delivery or delayed provision of goods to the customer is not going to make the customer happy. So we could track percentage of sales on back order and try to keep the number low. We could track cycle service level, which is percentage of replenishment cycles with zero stock out. That sounds like a mouthful. I'm going to explain what that is in detail. So if you don't get it, don't worry. It's a parameter used to calculate inventory levels in safety stock. It's between 0 and 1 or 0 and 100%. And the higher it is, the more safety stock you carry. But then the good news is, the more safety stock you carry, the more demand you can meet, and you don't run out of, you don't have back orders, you don't run out of stock. Fill rate is also related. It's percentage of demand met from inventory or percentage of orders filled complete. And the percentage that's not met from inventory or that's not filled complete will go on back order or will be lost sales, because sometimes customer is not willing to wait. So customer will just walk away if you don't have the product. So cycle service level and fill rate try to avoid lost sales and try to avoid back orders. And so there are two parameters that kind of measure how much of the demand you're filling from the inventory. So you have available inventory for what percentage of the demand, okay, something like that. And we're going to look at the difference and exactly what they are very shortly. Then for deliveries, you want to track on-time deliveries. You could also track deliveries without any complaints, like how many deliveries went well, where the customer had no problem. The opposite of that is inaccurate orders. How many things you shipped and there was a mistake in the order. You shipped something else or a wrong quantity or a damaged item. Then you want to track the time aspect, like how long it takes for you to deliver. So order cycle time is the time between a customer placing an order and receiving an item. So if you go online right now and you place an order and you start a stopwatch, when you receive that order, that's the time on the stopwatch will be the order cycle time. And then you want to track the average order cycle time, maybe the variance in it, because you want it to have a reliable order cycle time. Then you can promise your customer, oh, we are able to process your order and deliver it within this much time. If you have very high variability, then if you promise something, then there'll be many orders that don't meet that. You could also track very late deliveries. You could say, well, if I deliver on time or I'm a little bit late, it's okay. But customers really get angry if I deliver very late. So maybe I'm promising, 2-day delivery. And if it goes on the third day, it's fine. But anything over 4 days, customers really going to be mad. So I want to track how many deliveries took more than 4 days. Then about customer complaints, you can track number of complaints, time taken for resolution, things like that. Now, in supply to order system, where you get product after you get the customer order, so customer orders some amount, then you produce it and deliver it or purchase it and deliver it. Order cycle time is really important because customers want their things fast. And they know that you're not going to have an inventory because it's a supply to order situation, like make to order, where the goods are procured or produced after the customer order is received. So think about restaurant, you place order for some food, and then they kind of cook it and give it to you. So the order cycle time is important. You don't want to wait for a long time in the restaurant. And then product availability metrics like percentage of sales on back order, cycle service level, fill rate, they're really important in supply to stock situation or make to stock situation where you are providing product from finished goods inventory. So like a retailer or an online retailer, this sort of measures are really important in that situation. Now let's look at customer service level and fill rate in detail. Cycle service level and fill rate in detail. Cycle service level, abbreviated as CSL, is the probability that all demand during a replenishment cycle is met with no stock out. So, or in other words, you can call it the fraction of replenishment cycles with zero stockouts. So what is the replenishment cycle? That is the time between receiving two successive replenishments from your supplier. So you have a warehouse or a distribution center, and let's say you get a shipment from your supplier once a month. So the time between any two replenishment shipments that you get is 1 month. And so that's your replenishment cycle. So you will look at historical data and say, okay, 90% of the months I have no stock out. And that means that's my cycle service level, CSL. Okay. If you do have historical data, how do you calculate it? You say number of cycles without stock out divided by total number of cycles times 100%. That's your cycle service level. Fill rate is the percentage of total demand that is satisfied immediately from on-hand inventory. Okay. It measures how much of demand is filled immediately without back orders or lost sales. And the fill rate is going to be units shipped or supplied or sold from stock divided by units ordered. So if the demand was for 100 units, you were able to supply 99, then you would do units shipped is 99, demand was 100. So 99 over 100 times 100%, or 99% is your unit fill rate, or fill rate FR. Let me show you an example. So this is a plot of inventory levels over time. And the blue line indicates how much inventory you had at any given time. So day one, you have close to zero inventory, then inventory goes up. Maybe you received some product, goes up, comes down because you made lots of sales. So it's going up and down. Negative inventory shows back orders. So a negative inventory of minus 300 showed there was demand for 300 units you could not supply, and that's like on back order. Okay. CSL reflects the frequency of stockouts, the percentage of cycles in which stockouts occur. Okay. You can see here the cycles are very short. Every few days your inventory level jumps up, so you get a replenishment. So the time between replenishment is like 3 days or something. So there's many cycles, replenishment cycles on this chart. And so about 4 of them have a stock out or a back order, right? So you run out of stock. There's a stock out, you either go back or you lose sales. So 4 out of, I don't know how many cycles there are, you can kind of count, but that would be your cycle service level. Fill rate, on the other hand, doesn't care about the frequency of stock out as much as it does about the amount that you were negative in inventory, or amount of back order or lost sales. So you calculate the total amount of sales made, and you calculate how many sales you missed or went on back order, which is the negative parts of the chart. You add the negative values up. Obviously, you don't use the negative sign, just add them up. You need the magnitude. Then you divide by total sales made, and that's your fill rate. So let's look at an example on how that happens. So we have 10 months of data. Okay. Each month is a replenishment cycle because inventory replenishes every month in this situation. So the table shows data for 10 inventory cycles. There's no back orders. If the item is not in stock, customer walks away. Look at month 1. Okay. Our demand was 150. We could only sell 140 because we didn't have enough inventory. So lost sales were 10. That means we had a stock out. So in terms of CSL, this month, this replenishment cycle, there was a stock out. Month 2, our demand and sales are the same. So we were able to fulfill all of the demand. 0 lost sales. So that's not a stock out. Month 3, not a stock out. Month 4, again, a second stock out. Month 5, a third stock out, and then we have no more stock outs. So 3 replenishment cycles, we have a stock out. So we'll calculate CSL like this. 10 minus 3 or 7 replenishment cycles had 0 stock outs, divided by 10, which is the total replenishment cycles, gives you 0.7. Then you just multiply it by 100% because it's usually expressed as a percentage. So our CSL becomes 70%. Now to calculate the fill rate, we'll calculate the demand that was actually fulfilled. So that will be your sales column, okay? You can sum up your sales column, which is going to be 1145, or you can just say, I'm going to sum demand minus lost sales. Well, demand minus lost sales equals sales because 150 minus 10 is 140, which is the sales value in month 1. So it's the same thing. You sum the sales column or you sum demand minus lost sales. That's how many sales you actually did. So what sales you did, that's the numerator, 1145, divided by the total demand, which is 1180. That gives you 0.97. You multiply it by 100%, and you get a fill rate of 97%. Notice how CSL was very pessimistic. It was saying 70% of the time there's no stock out, which is true. 7 out of 10 months you have no stock out. But when you do have a stock out, it's for a very tiny amount. You may be selling 150 and you stock out for just 5 units. So the fill rate captures that. It says, well, the stock outs are not very deep. We are fulfilling the vast majority of the demand, right? So if you look at the fill rate, you might say it's not a very bad situation. If you look at the CSL, you might say, oh, 70% is too low. So you have to kind of understand what both of them are telling you. Now, a 97 fill rate may not be very good sometimes, because if you have a very competitive market and each time you have a stock out, the customer switches to a competitor. If that was the case, then, annoying 3% of customers on average and then losing them, it may not be a sustainable strategy. You may need a higher fill rate. But if the customers are okay with the occasional missed order, or occasional inability to satisfy their demand, as long as most of the time you satisfy the vast majority of their demand, then you might say fill rate of 97% is good enough. 3% of the demand I didn't satisfy, but that's not customer lost forever. They're going to come back to me next month or so on. Now, sometimes people have this misconception that fill rate is always more than the cycle service level. That's not always true. So I'm giving you 2 examples. In the first one, in the shaded area, we have a retailer that observes 10 replenishment cycles. Okay. Over the 10 cycles, they had huge stock outs of 1,000 units each. So every cycle, they're having a huge stock out. Total demand was 20,000. Unfulfilled demand is 10,000. So over 100 replenishment cycles, 10 of them had stock outs. So 90 did not have a stock out. So for CSL, it'll be 90 cycles without a stock out, over 100 or 90%. For the fill rate, out of 20,000 demand, you only had sales of 10,000. So 10,000 over 20,000 will give you 50%. So the cycle service level of 90% is much higher than the fill rate. And it can be higher because you very infrequently have stock outs, but when you do have a stock out, it's a huge for a huge amount of units. Okay. This would be an example where demand peaks under certain months, and whenever the demand peaks, you can never meet the peak. You have huge stock outs, so you miss all the peaks of demand. And so even though your cycle service level is high, most of the time you don't have stock outs, but you do have stock outs in the peak months, and then you lose a lot of your demand, and that's why your fill rate is 50%. So both metrics are important to track. In the second example, we have 40 cycles with a stock out of 100. So our CSL is only 60% cycles without a stock out. But each time we have a stock out, it's just for 1 unit. It's very tiny. So we have a 99.6% fill rate. So fill rate can be more than CSL. So it could happen either way. Usually, if your safety stock is set correctly and you don't have huge seasonality or huge peaks in demand, just have some random variability, you will observe that fill rate will tend to be higher than cycle service level. If CSL is like 90% or 95%, fill rate might be 97, 98%. But there's no limit or mathematical constraint on the fill rate that it has to be more than CSL, as these examples show. Either of the two could be more or less. These are like examples I made up just to show the point. Most cases you will find if CSL is a reasonable value and you don't have extreme peaks in your demand in certain months, you would observe that the fill rate tends to be higher than the CSL, but it doesn't have to be. Okay, so let's talk about our last topic on the logistics customer service, which is what happens if there's a service failure and how do we recover from that. Situations will occur when actual performance does not meet the customer's expected performance. That's the definition of a service failure. So you might think there's no service failure because you think you did a good job, but if it does not meet the customer's expectation, it is a service failure because the customer is now not happy with you and the customer could take their demand elsewhere. Now, examples of order-related service failures include, so order cycle is what happens when a customer places the order till you deliver it. So that's where you can have a service failure. If the customer has not ordered something, you're not providing the service of delivery or installation or things like that. So examples of order cycle or order-related service failures include lost delivery, late delivery, early delivery, which you might think is good in many cases, and it is. But in some cases, if the customer is expected to be home, like a furniture delivery, and you tell the customer a time window, okay, I'm going to be there between noon and 4 p.m. on this day, and you get there at 10 a.m. and then start calling the customer's at work or something, they're not going to be happy. So for scheduled deliveries where there's installation involved or you have to go inside the customer's home, early delivery can also be, it's not going to be good either. Damaged delivery, obviously, especially for things like furniture, appliances, incorrect delivery quantity, all of these things are examples of service failures. And sometimes service failures will happen, like no system is perfect, sometimes out of your control, some accidents on the road, some product got damaged in the rain, whereas you thought the packaging was waterproof, but it was not, the supplier did something with the packaging, things like that. So when a service failure does happen, you have to think about service recovery. What is service recovery? It's how do you return a customer to a state of satisfaction after you have annoyed them with a service failure. And it also is used when there's a quality failure with a product. If you are the manufacturer, you kind of have to do service recovery. From a logistics perspective, quality of the product is the supply chain and operations responsibility. As long as we don't damage it on the route, we will just, as a logistics person, you would mostly be concerned with issues with the delivery, damages on the route, late delivery, things like that. But if the product quality is bad, that's something caused by that's something that supply chain and operations need to look at to make sure the quality is there. It's often costly, especially if you're reacting to events with no a priori planning. So if you don't plan for what type of service failures can happen and how do you recover, and you're just trying to firefight your way through it, it can get costly because customers will be complaining and you're trying to satisfy them, and you might take some costly steps to do that. If you do it properly, it can lead to increased customer loyalty because customer can say, okay, life happens, things happen, but they really went out of their way to make it up to me and help me resolve the issue. So customers can actually say, oh, you care about the customer, you care about me, I'm going to stick with you, I'm going to give you my business in future. It also usually results in a better performing logistics organization because you learn from your mistakes and you implement processes and policies to prevent recurrence. Because you don't just recover from service and say, okay, let it happen again and I'm going to recover again. You say, okay, why did it happen? Let's see if we can improve our processes so it doesn't happen much. So you need to have contingency plans in place. So if the system breaks down, do we insure the risk so that we don't lose a lot of money? What are our alternative supply sources, alternative transportation sources? Can we shift, if you're an online retailer, can you shift orders going to the regional distribution center or warehouse to the nearest one if this distribution center has a strike or a fire or something? Can you try to switch the customer to alternative products if a product has a problem and you can't deliver it? Then sometimes you have quality issues where you have to do a product recall. So the manufacturer says, oh, we have a quality issue, this item is not safe. So you need to send us all the items you have in your inventory back. And so you need to have, often you might have a committee look at these things for planning. What if a product recall comes? What if a system breakdown happens? If it's a product recall, you often need to do a big activity to trace the product and see where have you delivered it, which warehouse it is in. If only one batch, a product recall might just affect certain batches of the product and not all the product you have. So let's say you have a huge stock of cell phone chargers in your warehouse, but only some of them have a fire risk, those produced in a certain month. So now you have to kind of trace, okay, those produced in that month would have arrived to my warehouse on these dates. I have to track everything that arrived on those dates. I have to pull it out, send it back to the manufacturer, things like that. And obviously, because a lot of product flow happens from upstream suppliers down towards the customer, we have a lot of transportation capacity this way, but then sometimes we have to send product returns the other way and product recalls the other way upstream towards the supplier or manufacturer. And so that's called reverse logistics, doing logistics in the reverse direction. And you need to have some plans on how you're going to do that. You could just outsource that to a 3PL, or you might have some inspection to be done in your warehouse or DC before you send it back up to the manufacturer or supplier. So you can do some scenario planning. If this scenario happens, what do we do? If this scenario happens, what do we do? And have some contingency plans in place. Okay, let's conclude with logistics strategy, bring everything together, bring the cost and service aspect together, and talk about logistics strategy. Logistics has been really important, and these are just some examples, historical examples where logistics were the difference between victory and defeat. But we're going to talk mostly logistics in terms of organizations and companies, not militaries. So I'm just going to skip this slide and leave it in. If you have an interest in history, you can look into these things. But I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about them. This is just interesting for your information type of thing. So let's go to logistics strategy and customer service, bring everything together, what we've talked about in this lesson. So logistics strategy, what is that? Based on what we have discussed, we're going to define it as logistics strategies to determine what level of customer service to offer to which customers to maximize our profit. Customer service has several dimensions, and different bundles of the logistics customer service may be relevant to different people. Some customers may only care about quick delivery. Some customers may only care about product variety. Some customers may care most about reliability of the delivery or on-time delivery, right? And so you can kind of target them with different service offerings. So for example, people who really care about fast delivery, we have the Amazon Prime program. If you're an Amazon Prime member, you can get same day or next day delivery on certain items. But if you don't care about fast delivery, then you don't have to pay the fee and be an Amazon Prime member. Okay? So that's Amazon trying to split their customer base into separating and identifying who cares about fast delivery and then serving them separately than the other customers or in a separate fashion with a different logistics service bundle. Now, different customer service offerings will have different costs. So you might only offer high level of service for items on which you have high margin, or to certain customers who pay an extra amount, like for a delivery charge or a membership charge, something like that. So customer service offerings often need to be customized for different customer groups and segments. So you often, one size fit all is not the right answer. You don't want to have just one logistics service offering. You want to have segmentation for your customer base, if it makes sense, if your customers are diverse, and say, okay, this group of customers want this thing, I can provide it to them. Or you might say it's too costly to serve these three segments. I'm just going to serve these two segments. So I'm just going to serve everybody with the same plan. But at least you have to think through, does segmentation make sense? Does it make sense to have different service bundles and price them differently, or have different products that go with different service bundles that are sold to different customers? Now, when you are determining your logistics strategy, there are three key principles to keep in mind. Okay. The first one is to always take a systems perspective. There are trade-offs between logistics costs, especially between inventory and transportation costs. And so you have to understand those trade-offs, because otherwise you could say, okay, I'm going to do X, Y, Z, and then not understand how that impacts other areas of your logistics operations. Okay. For example, you might say, I never want to have, I want to have very fast delivery. So I'm going to have a lot of distribution centers close to the customers. But as you learn later in the course, the more distribution centers you set up, the higher your inventory carrying costs become, because each distribution center now has to have some inventory of every product. There's no centralization of inventory anymore. Okay? And so you might say, oh, I expect I'm going to give a high service level in terms of quick delivery, but you never realize that that's going to also impact your inventory levels and inventory costs if you do not take a systems perspective. So always look at the effects of the decisions and the policies on the whole system, because often you'll see that it does not just affect one cost or one area, it affects several different things. You want to be profit maximizing, not just look at just cost, because higher levels of customer service will lead to higher revenue. So you want to look at the revenue side and the cost side. So the appropriate level of customer service kind of determines, okay, what sort of revenue are you targeting? And then you want to minimize the cost while still achieving that revenue to profit maximize. Avoid focusing on costs in isolation, like just transportation costs or just inventory costs, because there are trade-offs amongst logistics costs, and making one cost go down could increase the other cost. You want to look at the total cost, see what makes the total cost go down. And then you need to collaborate between different functions within the firm. Marketing needs to know what they can promise to the customer. Customer service reps need to know what the logistics function can do, what it's supposed to do. Sales need to work with you, because if they're running a sales promotion and they expect higher demand, you better have delivery capacity to deliver those orders. And so you have to take a systems perspective, not just in terms of cost, that you consider all of the relevant costs, but also in terms of working with other functions to make sure that different functions support each other and not make life harder for each other. Then you want to consider mixed strategies. Mixed strategy means that you don't have to do everything with your own employees. For some faraway or remote customers, you may use a 3PL, a third-party logistics provider, some other company that does the delivery for you. And you may only do delivery for customers with high volume, or which are closer to your warehouses, and then you might outsource certain deliveries, right? Also design for differences in SKUs and customers. Not all SKUs have similar demand patterns. Some of them sell consistently, like a white t-shirt sells year-round. Some of them have seasonal demand. And so, if something has a more stable demand, you can set aside resources for it. Okay, this area of the warehouse will store that product. These trucks will deliver that product or to those customers. But for things with variable demand, you may have to scale up and down. You may have to hire temporary workers in your warehouse to deal with the increase in demand on during certain months or seasons. And so you have to factor that in. Is the demand stable across the year? Is the demand variable? Is there high seasonality? Like some toy companies, they make most of their sales in the last 3 months of the year. And then the first 9 months of the year, they are just a very low level of sales. So, designing your strategy for that sort of product segment, like toys, is going to be very different than designing your strategy for staple items that sell year round. Okay, so keep these three principles in mind when thinking of logistics strategy. Now, design for differences. When you think about products, some products have physical characteristics that are different. They have different amount of gross margin. High gross margin means you can maybe spend a little bit more on the logistics and still make good money. But something with a low margin, you can't offer a level of service that's going to eat up all the margin in logistics costs. If you are making, $1 on selling something that's $10, then your logistics can't cost the whole dollar, the whole profit you made, and then you end up with nothing. Logistics must cost like 20 cents out of, or 30 cents, so you can still keep some of the dollar that you earned as profit. So you may have much less options on products with very thin margins. You may just have to go for cost efficiency. With this product with high margins like iPhones, electronics, you may have many different options that you can use. Also seasonality, I already talked about. FIFA World Cup t-shirt is only going to sell in the World Cup days. And so you have to plan for that and have your logistics set up to quickly ramp up and deliver those shirts in the World Cup days, but then kind of do something else or ramp down after the World Cup. Not all customers are the same. You should be trying to learn about your customers, trying to learn what they value through market research. Look at their frequency of purchase, their average order size. Maybe you want to cluster and group the customer by order size and frequency. Customers who order frequently in small orders, the way to satisfy that demand may be very different than the way to satisfy a demand for customers that order large amounts, for example. Not all suppliers are the same. Again, your supply side is going to be variable. Some suppliers are far off with long lead time, less reliable shipments because they have to go through international waters and ports and so on. Weather can affect them. Port delays can affect them. Other supplier could just be just down the street from you and the delivery is very reliable. Which is why, metrics like we need to ship all orders within 24 hours are really not that useful because it's often not required to provide that high level of service for all SKUs and all customers. You might say, we want to deliver, 90% of our high value items within 24 hours or something. But then there may be SKUs with thin margins or infrequent sales where it's not worth it to offer a high level of logistics service. So use segmentation, cluster analysis to figure out different groups of customers and products and kind of figure out which level of logistics service is appropriate. One important thing you can do is customer profitability analysis, allocation of revenues and cost to customer segments or individual customers. And this is a really interesting analysis, especially for logistics firms. And what you often find is that a small percentage of your customers give you a lot of your profits, and maybe a lot of your customers are unprofitable to serve because they ask for a lot, but you are selling them low margin products and you're not making much money off them. Okay. So some of your most demanding customers may only be buying cheap, low margin products off you, and then most of the gross margin you make, you just pay out in logistics costs to serve that customer. But decision to keep or drop customers must be taken on marginal costs. Like if you get rid of this customer, sometimes what happens is that your costs don't go down at all. So you said, okay, I'm not going to serve this one customer, but you still have a truck going to that area to serve other customers in the area. And had you kept that customer, there'll be no additional cost. It's just using free space in your truck that's already going there half empty. Okay. So you have to think about, okay, if I drop this customer and I lose this revenue, how much of my cost will be saved? How many costs will go down to zero? And sometimes you'll realize that a lot of costs will not change because you still have to go to that area. You still have to serve other customers in the area. So that is why sometimes it's just not worth it to drop unprofitable customers because there's no additional cost to serve them. You're already going to that area. You might as well deliver to them and things like that. Sometimes fixed costs don't go down. So maybe you got rid of 10% of your unprofitable customers and you were expecting to now make a lot of profit, but you're not because, a lot of your costs are fixed costs, even though you got rid of, 10% of your customers or products to sell, your fixed costs are not falling, and so your cost structure is kind of locked in. So you have to do a very careful analysis when you decide the different customer segments to serve, what level of logistics service to offer them, who not to serve. That all has to be based on careful analysis. Now, what if you say, okay, I don't want to serve this unprofitable customer? In business to business settings, if that is a shop or retailer or a business, that's easy. When your contract with them expires, don't renew the contract. But when you're serving end consumer, let's say you're Walmart and you say, okay, I'm not going to serve customers who make less than $30,000 per year because they are not very profitable to serve. I have to keep the store open on late hours for them, or I have to do this or that for them, and then they're not buying enough to really, pay me back for my investment and so on. However, that would be a huge social issue. Okay, Walmart closes their door to poor customers, right? Imagine the headlines. And so sometimes, and there could be local laws involved, regulation involved, you can't say no to customers, especially if you're serving end users. You're a food chain, like let's say McDonald's, you're a retail store, right? But in B2B settings, it's often you can pick and choose your customers. You don't have to serve everybody. Then sometimes regulation comes into play, limiting the amount of segmentation you can do. So for the internet, you may have fair usage regulation, which says all customers who pay the same amount, are gonna be have equal bandwidth available to them. But then you have some customers which will not use a lot of the bandwidth, and some customers will be like using up a lot of that bandwidth, but they're all paying the same amount. And sometimes, because of the fair use laws, you can't discriminate against them. You have to make the bandwidth available to them in the same way because they're paying the same amount. One way you can try to segment that then is like what Sam's Club would do. You have like an annual membership, and if you have a membership, you get free delivery on certain items, and you can go to the store on certain hours when regular members can't because you're like a pro member or a plus member, and there's some fee you pay for that. So that's airlines do that, with their points, reward points, and so on. So you can do something like that where you say, okay, I can't not serve certain customers, but some customers are not profitable, and there's some I can serve better to get more revenue out of them. And then you can try to segment them and have customers who really like your services become like pro members or something, and then offer different levels of logistics customer service to different customers. Now, the customer service you provide is also affected by the nature of the product. They're convenience product where you have to have availability. Okay? Place utility is very important for convenience products. If you are selling soft drinks through vending machines, the vending machine has to be in a convenient location, and it has to have high level of availability in terms of the stock, because that's a product that customers buy on a whim as they are, in some place, they see it and they want it. Right? If it's out of inventory, they're not going to wait for it to be refilled. If it's not in a convenient spot, they may not want to walk 20 to get to the vending machine. Right? So the distribution of vending machines is going to be different than how you distribute or allocate inventory for things like furniture, because people are willing to drive 30 minutes to go to a furniture store, but they're not willing to drive 30 minutes or walk 30 minutes or 20 minutes to go find a soda machine. So convenience products are different. Shopping products are products where customers will compare options, things like shoes, clothes, electronics. These often are shopping products. And then specialty products are where customers need options, or these are big ticket purchases like doing your kitchen cabinets or installing something in your home, where you would the customer would maybe work with the company, say this is the type of thing I want, and there the form of the thing, the color, the shape, the size, those things can matter a lot. And then you have industrial products. These are products that are going to be used in manufacturing something else. So imagine a chemical, you produce some chemical, it is used by a company to make paint. So you supply chemical to this factory, and then they're going to use it to make paint. In industrial products, you'll often have contracts on service level, as called SLAs, service level agreements that will say, if I place a replenishment order, it needs to be given to my factory within 7 business days. And, the product should not have a defect rate more than this. Or if there is a defect and you find it, you're going to be liable for all the costs. So there could be service level agreements. Often some agreement like that would kind of determine, what logistics service you provide for those industrial products. So segmentation is often done for customers and SKUs, and purchasing will often do segmentation for suppliers as well. Okay. The rules of the thumb when doing segmentation are that SKUs or products within a segment should be homogeneous, similar on important features, including physical dimensions for SKUs. Because if they're not homogeneous and you're treating them in the same way, because each segment you have a plan for how you do logistics for that segment. If they're very, very different products, like you have a refrigerator and ping pong balls in the same segment, well, the equipment you need to load, unload refrigerators from trucks versus ping pong balls is going to be very different. Or ping pong balls, you don't need a lot of equipment. So you don't want to put them in the same segment, because then for that segment, you're going to assign resources. And then if they're very, very different products in the same segment, then it kind of defeats the purpose of doing segmentation in the first place. Now, different segments should have important differences. Because if two segments are very, very similar, they should maybe be clubbed into one segment. Critical mass. The segment should have enough numbers to make it worthwhile. So you don't want to create a segment with just 5 customers or just 1% of the customers, because it's not going to pay back well to customize your logistics offering for so few customers. There must be a critical mass, certain number of customers that makes it worthwhile to give them a customized logistics service or customize your logistics for them. And there should be useful and measurable differences between these customer segments. No point making a segment which is different, but different on something that nobody cares about. So maybe there's no point in splitting your customers, let's say, based on age, okay? If you are selling things like office stationery, like pens, pencils, papers, maybe somebody who's 15 years old versus 10-year-old versus 25-year-olds, maybe it doesn't matter that much. They all, have similar expectations and the products are very similar that you sell them, right? So it should be based on the reason which leads to differences in the type of products they want, the type of logistics service they want, and so on. One thing you can also consider is to look at the average demand level of different SKUs. So those that sell really well versus those that sell at medium level, those that sell less. Think about ABC classification based on sales levels. So A products are those that consistently sell a lot of quantity, right? Because if you sell something in a large quantity, you can dedicate resources to it. Okay, so I'm going to be moving this many cartons or units through my distribution center and delivery, and so I can send full truckloads of delivery and things like that. And then you can also look at variability, because something that sells well, like A or B class, and has low variability is the easiest to plan for. You can really attack logistics costs because everything is stable. It's a stable expected level of quantity. You sell week in, week out, month in, month out. So you can really optimize your logistics and plan for that. But something which is very variable, so it sells a lot, but the actual sales quantity is very variable, then you need to have some, it may not be able to optimize costs as much. You may have a separate segment for them, right? Maybe use LTL shipments sometimes and so on and so forth. And then things that sell very low amounts, C items, they could be their own segment. So some people just do ABC classification. A lot of logistics textbook will say, oh, just do ABC, and you want to optimize your logistics for A and B items and really drive costs down because they are most of your sales. And C items, you should offer a lower level of logistics customer service because they're not that profitable and they sell infrequently. And that is all fine, but if you add the variability in sales as well, because A and B are not that different, except if you don't consider variability. But if you consider variability, a stable B is more like a stable A than a stable B versus a variable B or a volatile B item. So you want to combine the volatile items together to kind of group them and deal with them together. Maybe you can merge shipments and maybe you can combine orders for them to kind of handle if one product goes down in sales, maybe the other goes up, and so you're still getting, on total, you're getting like the same volume. And so, something like this is a little bit of an improvement on ABC classification. So you take ABC and you add variability high versus low variability on the other axis, and you classify instead of classifying into ABC, you classify into volatile, stable, and low impact. So volatile is A and B with high variance, stable is A and B with low variance, and low impact is all the C's, whether they're high variance or low variance. And then this volatile, stable, low impact helps you optimize logistics for each group better than just looking at ABC classification. So I would recommend, if you've been following books or internet advice just to ABC classification, try this one, and you'll often find that you can do better with volatile, stable, and low impact than ABC. Now pause the video and think about C items. C items are often a large number of SKUs in your system that don't sell well. They sell very infrequently. So what should we do? Should we get rid of all of them or most of them because, we don't make much money off them? They just sell very infrequently. Should we get rid of the worst ones only, just prune them a little bit? Sometimes B items become C items as they reach end of life and nobody wants them anymore. Or do something else. So pause and think about what are the options, what can we do with C items, and then you can restart this video and see what we talk about. Okay, so the traditional approach is to try to minimize costs for C items by automating things. So don't automate their replenishment. Don't offer a high logistics service level on them. If sometimes they're out of stock, that's fine. Use cheap transportation on them. Maybe eliminate some aspect of the C's, prune them somewhat so that you can focus more and assign your resources more to the stable and volatile or A and B items. Right? And product lifecycle tells us that if we don't prune items from the C items, the C category will grow over time as products go towards end of life and nobody's buying them anymore. They'll all become C items in the system and sell infrequently, and then you still have them on our books. So you want to prune some of them, and you want to automate as much of the processes around them as possible. However, some companies take a very opposite approach. They say C items are what we do, like Amazon. Okay. So when bookstores used to carry popular books like, 30,000, 20,000, 5,000 books in a big bookstore, they're all popular books. Amazon said, no, I'm going to carry millions of books, whether they're popular or not. Okay. And then 30 to 40% of Amazon's sales were from the books, their C tail, that don't sell a lot individually, but because bookstores don't carry them, anybody who wants them has to go to Amazon to get it. So when they come to Amazon to buy that rare book they need, they also buy other books from Amazon, right? So it becomes Amazon's selling point. If you look at Netflix, they offer thousands of titles, tens of thousands of titles versus Redbox, DVD, Blu-ray checkout machines that have maybe a few hundred items, right? And then you can see that again, Netflix, a lot of their sales comes from items not stocked in DVD or Blu-ray rental type of places. And obviously, we're getting less and less popular. The DVD or Blu-ray rentals are getting less and less popular. People just stream videos now, whether it's Netflix or HBO or some other service. So this example is kind of getting outdated, but the point still stands that you can, if you can serve people in a cost-efficient way on C items, the C items, the long tail could be the thing that brings you customers, or a large chunk of customers, because they can't find them anywhere else. So when does it make sense to expand the tail or to keep it and not reduce it? You want to do direct shipping to the customer from centralized inventory, because keeping it on retail stores or many customer locations is going to get prohibitively expensive. You want to have some type of postponement where, for example, at Amazon, some books get printed on demand. Like there's no physical inventory of the book. When you hit buy and you buy the books get printed and bound and shipped to you. So that means they don't have to carry inventory for a lot of books, because the book will just get printed whenever the user wants to buy it. So centralizing inventory, postponement, and then also try to recommend the C items to the right customers to increase their sales. They're C items because they don't sell well. But what if you try to give a little bit of boost to their sales so they sell enough to break even for us? So you can recommend items in a long tail to customers through inexpensive means, such as online recommendations. They visit your website and they get some recommendations. And this can help the C items have enough demand that you're not losing money on them. Okay. So that is it for the logistics service. We take about some examples, talked about classification, segmentation, talked about how different products are different. We talked about customers are different, customer profitability analysis, and you should know what CPA is. If I didn't go into a lot of detail on what CPA is, that's because these things are covered often in accounting classes. But if you are not aware of what customer profitability analysis is, you can look it up online. It's basically for every customer, you look at what you sold to that customer, what it costs you to provide that delivery or other service to the customer, and then how much money did you earn from that customer. Okay, and then we talked about some key principles in logistics strategy. So that is it. That is what we were going to talk about, that we wanted to cover in this lecture. We learned about logistics costs, how logistics can be a value driver, create value by increasing revenues. You learn about aspects of logistics customer service, and then you learn about logistics strategy, which is how do you choose a profit maximizing level of logistics customer service to offer. That also helps you increase your revenues without being prohibitively expensive. And then we learned about some principles to keep in mind when designing our logistics strategy.